All right, so we talked about the history of computers in general. Let's specifically talk about the history of the internet. That makes sense because this class is about web production, right? So let's learn about the history of the internet. So to understand or to go back to the history of the internet, we got to go back to about 1957. Okay, you might say, why would we go back to there? Well, what happened in 1957 is the Soviet Union, which is now modern day Russia, minus a couple of countries, launched a satellite called Sputnik into space. Okay. The US military got concerned that the Soviet Union had satellites in space. We were concerned that we were losing the space race and that the satellite might disrupt communications and that sort of thing. Like by communications, I mean like phone wire and stuff like that. So they decided, they being the US military, decided they needed a system in which they could send information quickly back and forth. Okay. This was referred to as the Advanced Research Project Agency Network, also known as ARPANET. Okay. So the mission of this was to speed up communications and safety between a large group of networked computers. Okay, so this is a picture from 1973, just to show you, like I said, 1973, there weren't a lot of computers around. There were some, but, this is showing you which computers were part of ARPANET. Okay, basically, if you went to a university that had a strong computer science program like MIT or Carnegie Mellon or Stanford or something like that, you probably were part of the ARPANET at that point. There was also this guy, this computer scientist named Bob Kahn. Okay, Bob Kahn was given a task. His task was, hey, we need you to design a system that can survive a nuclear attack. So let me kind of show you how it works. So basically, the way computers normally were networked, which meant they were connected, was there was one central computer. And then if you wanted to get information from that computer, all of these little circles are computers, you would connect to this computer and you would download the information at this, 1970s, some sort of text document, I'm assuming. Maybe if you're lucky, a photo, but that would have been kind of crazy. And so everyone here is connecting to this main computer and download. Now there's a problem with this. Okay, what's the problem? Well, let's just hypothetically say this computer goes offline. Let's say, and this is what the fear of the US military was, is let's say, Soviet Union launches a missile, destroys this computer. The problem is all of these other computers are now basically useless. They can't talk to each other because they all are going through this one central source. Okay, so Bob Kahn was given this task of like, well, we need a better method of this. And so he came up with what he called a mesh. Okay, and a mesh is what the modern day internet is kind of basically based off of, which is that instead of having one central computer, you have multiple computers that are all connected to each other. Okay, this is sometimes referred to as this distributed network. Okay, so let's say here's one computer, and then let's say this computer wants to send a file to this computer. Instead of having to go through this central source, the way the old system would do it, is there's multiple possibilities. So this computer can hand off to here and then go down this way. All these circles in this case represent computers that are part of the network and then eventually reach its destination. Now let's hypothetically say this computer goes offline. How does it go offline? It could be destroyed, or it could just literally just be turned off if someone turns off the computer. So this, this no longer is a valid option. Well, that's okay because we can still go this way. So you can see there's literally multiple ways for this computer to, get the information from one side to the other. So this is a much better way that Bob Kahn designed. And it's basically the foundation of what the internet is. The internet is essentially a bunch of computers that all talk to each other. Okay, so this computer that I'm using is a computer that's part of the network. The computer that you are connecting to watch this video is on the network. Someone else's laptop, someone else's smartphone, someone else's Xbox, someone else's tablet, so on and so on and so on. All these computers are connected to each other. Okay. And if you turn your computer off, then it just kind of drops off the network, but then it's okay because there's other computers that are still on the network. And anytime someone else joins, someone on the other side of the world wakes up, turns the computer on, they join the network as well. So that's the basis of the internet. Talking about just as kind of like the commercial side of it. So the internet's kind of been around since basically the 70s. However, to be perfectly honest, or actually I should take that back. The internet's been around since the early 70s, but it was classified under military. Okay, it wasn't declassified until the early 80s. In the 80s, the only people who were really using the internet were colleges that had really strong computer science programs, because basically to understand how to connect to the internet was still very technical. And remember, in the 80s, a lot of people didn't really own computers. And so therefore, a lot of people, didn't have the technology even to connect to the internet, even if that's what they wanted to do, or it was too technical and there wasn't really a lot of help at that point to help people get access. So it really wasn't until about the early 90s that the internet kind of exploded as a concept. So in the early 90s, this is what I call the start of the commercial web. 1980s is what I call the academic web, because it was basically academic people connecting with each other and kind of posting information. 1990s, you get the commercial web. Okay. And so there was these services that made accessing the internet really, really easy. Okay, so America Online, CompuServe. Remember what I said earlier, by the early 90s, a lot of families were starting to have computers because the cost had gone down. So the access was easier. People have cheaper equipment to do it. So now more people are getting online, essentially. This is going to show you, this is the very first phone that ever had the internet. It's the Nokia 9000 communicator. It was released in 1996. It weighed roughly 3/4 of a pound and cost, if you adjusted for inflation, a little more than $2,000. Okay, but it did have the internet. Hey. All right, so the internet, the commercial web starts up in the early 90s. There's not an exact year, but kind of like 92, 93. This leads to a lot of internet startup companies. Okay, so a lot of companies start up in around the late 90s, and they start releasing something called an IPO. Or an initial public offering. I don't want to get too technical because this is not a financial class, but essentially an IPO is when a company releases stock or a percentage of the company that people can buy. In the same way you could buy stock in, say, Ford, or you could buy stock in, I don't know, Dole, pineapples. You could now buy stock in internet companies. This was the first time that was really something you could do. Now, the problem with this is a lot of speculators overestimated these companies. A lot of these companies were very young. They'd been around for 2 years. And to be perfectly honest, a lot of their business plans were not very good. So a lot of these companies they lasted about 2 to 3 years, and then they basically failed. They didn't make any money, or they didn't make as much money as they thought they were going to make, but they were releasing stock. And so tech stock in the late 90s, early 2000s was like all the rage with all the investors. So a lot of people were buying these stock in really bad companies. And so what happened is when all of these companies went under, a lot of investors lost their money. This is known as the dot-com bubble. Happened right here in San Francisco for the most part. Okay. So a lot of companies go under, a lot of people lose a lot of money because they were told that pets.com was going to be the new cool thing, and they put a bunch of money in and they lost that money, or it's a fraction of what it used to be. And so people were kind of like, oh, this internet's dumb. And so for, the early 2000s till about 2004, it was kind of quiet because a lot of people lost a lot of money. So no one was exactly gung-ho about investing in new internet technology. Okay. But what happened in about 2004 was this idea, this concept known as Web 2.0. Okay. Web 2.0 was referred to as the participatory or social web. Okay, you can probably see where I'm going with this. So it refers to websites having an emphasis on user-generated content or people participating in the website itself. Okay. This was the term Web 2.0 was popularized by this guy named Tim O'Reilly. So most of you probably weren't around in the 90s like I was, but in the 90s, websites were kind of more like magazines in the sense of like, there was text and there was images and that kind of stuff. But that was kind of it. You definitely, you could not upload your own content. Like, think about what you do on the internet. When you go on Instagram and you upload a photo, that concept did not exist in the 90s. If you went on YouTube and you wanted to upload your own video or stream your own video through Twitch or something, those concepts did not exist in the 90s. The web was kind of more like a digital book or a digital magazine. So this idea of being able to do things like have comments, have interactions, liking a post, sharing a post, all that kind of stuff, uploading your own content. Some sites are purely user-generated content, things like, Instagram and TikTok. They would not exist if users did not upload their own content. You know what I mean? And so that was this kind of idea, and it launched this thing that we all love that's near and dear to our hearts. It's called social media. Okay. So the very first social media company got released in 2003. It was called Friendster. I actually got a request for Friendster back in the day. I did not accept it because I didn't have a computer at the time, and I was just kind of like, whatever. I had a computer, but I don't know. For some reason, I just was like too busy, didn't want to do it. But, Friendster led to MySpace, which led to Facebook, which led to Tumblr, which led to Snapchat, which led to Instagram, which leads to TikTok, and then whatever the new thing is going to be. There's always the new thing, right? But these social media is a way for people to engage with each other, upload their own content, videos, photo, audio, whatever, share it with people, like it. Hey, look at, like and subscribe, all that kind of stuff. Okay. So I just want to kind of leave you with this question here. These are what I call my thought questions. You don't have to like literally turn this in or anything, but I just want you to think about it. But like, what exactly, I know this kind of is a basic question, but like, what is the internet? Like if you had to describe, like imagine an alien came down from another country, another planet, right? It lands and you meet this alien and they've never heard of the internet. They don't have the internet on their planet. How would you describe to someone what the internet is, right? Like, I know it's kind of a weird thing to think about, but I want you to think about it. Like, how do you describe what the internet is as a concept? Okay. Because that is that is what we're going to be doing in this class, pushing the boundaries of what the internet is. What can we do with the internet? What is it about? How do we code it? Okay. I'll spend a moment or two and I'll meet you in the next video. The next video, we're going to get a little bit more specific about how the internet works as a literal technological concept.